In this episode, I have a Sony MDS302 Minidisk. This one's got a mind of its own. And it's been doing weird things for a while, like not ejecting the disc, not reading the table of contents, playing a disc fully and then stopping. Try to edit a recording, try to delete something, doesn't work. Locks up, doesn't erase, does all kinds of strange things that's pointing to a logic problem. Let's see if we can figure this one out. This is a Sony MDS302 Minidisk. It's just stuck with standby flashing on the display. And, it turned on, but it's probably not going to read the disc. We'll see what happens. Might make a liar out of me one time. So it's going to read the disc this time, but I bet it won't read it a second time because this thing's had ongoing issues. So it's going to play. Now, if I eject the disc and I put it back in, it will likely not do anything. At least that's the way it has been. It has been where it will not eject, it will not load. And once it jams up, it won't eject. It's going to make a liar out of me now. It says talk reading on it, table of contents reading, and now it appears, okay, now it's gone. Well, that time it ejected on its own. Let's see if it will work. This is what happens with it. It'll just jam up and it won't read the table of contents. It's going to make a liar out of me, this stupid thing. For the past 6 months, this thing would not release the disc. It just sat there with standby flashing on the screen. Hmm. 16 didn't play. Why? This seems to be the problem. That is the problem. It won't eject. This is what it does. Say it loaded a few times there and then it just stopped working. So I'm going to pull this one apart and see if we can figure out why it's doing this. What I attempted to do is I attempted to edit and just to erase a track, and now it's stuck. And it's trying to write the table of contents and it's just stuck there. So I'm going to pull the top off this unit. It's still trying to write to the disk. it says eject on the screen, but the disk actually isn't even spinning. I'll unplug the power and see what happens. Of course, now it's working again. I think if I try to put this thing into record and then write the table of contents is when it's gonna bugger it up. So let's just try. I'll just try putting it into record just for a second, so we can see what happens. So there should be like a second or two of time remaining. If I go into record, I'm not going to record anything, but if I hit record, it'll move the laser out to where it's going to write. And when I release the pause button here, I've got 18 seconds remaining. So I'm just going to record for 18 seconds of blank by hitting the pause button. And that starts it recording. I'll stop it. And then when I eject the disk, it'll write the table of contents. And this time it worked. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to that track and I'm going to try erasing it, which is what happened when I tried. That's what made it jam up. So that's done by playing the disc and going to the track that I want to delete. So I want to delete track 16. So I got 16 paused. I hit the edit button. It says erase on the screen here. So I hit yes to erase it. And now it needs to write the table of contents. This is where it jammed up. So if I hit the eject button, it should write the table of contents and eject the disk. And of course this time it did. I wonder why it's failing once in a while. Weird. I'm going to get a can of compressed air. I just want to blow the dirt out of this thing. There's a bunch of dust. I'm going to use compressed air, not my air compressor, because the air compressor probably has a fair bit of moisture in it right now in the air because it's pretty damp out. So I'm going to use a can of dust. And that brings to another point. I use this as cold spray as well, because if you invert the can, you get cold spray, which is great for chilling components. Cheaper than buying cold spray. There are two types of this. There's Duster 134, and I think the other one's like 156 or something. Anyway, one's flammable and the other's not. If you're going to be working on live circuits, be sure, especially if you're using it as a component cooler, which is what I use this for, be sure you get the 134, because this is non-flammable. It says for use on energized equipment. See, this stuff here is kind of a little bit of ozone depleting, so they prefer to sell you the stuff like for blowing off your keyboards and stuff. They'll sell you the flammable stuff, so be careful. If you're going to be using this stuff around energized circuits, you get the 134. Otherwise, you could have a explosive experience. The other stuff is it's a flammable gas. I'm just going to direct this in around the optical block here, clean any dust out, because this thing here has got a fair bit of dust in it just from sitting around over the years. As you can see, it might be dust that's causing this problem, like dust on the laser. This mini disc hasn't been used a lot lately, but I have used it a couple times, and I've been listening to some of my old discs I've got a whole bunch of mini discs. I've been listening to some of my old discs, and this is not one of them. This was actually a relatively recent recording, because I put royalty-free Jack Waldenmayer Music Bakery content on this disc just for when I was testing stuff. So this is actually a relatively new disc as far as my mini disc recordings go. I've got dozens and dozens of mini discs that I recorded, you know, back in the 80s, 90s, when I used mini discs pretty much exclusively. I have a mini disc car player. Well, I just spotted something on this board that might explain why this thing's been doing weird things. It has a battery on the board here. See this? It's got a battery. Let me unplug the unit. Here, it's unplugged. No, it's not. Now it is. Let the power supply run down. At least it doesn't have a switching power supply. It's got a linear power supply. Let's just check the voltage of this stupid battery. I wonder whether the battery is starting to discharge and it's causing intermittent problems. Yeah. There's what I bet the problem is. 0.9 volts. Yeah, I bet you. That's why this thing acts up intermittently. Is that battery voltage is used to maintain probably something on the CPU, and every so often this thing, it'll lock up and it just won't do anything. The only way I can get this thing to work is by power cycling this thing. I bet you that battery, it's either a battery or a supercap. Let's take a closer look at it. Well, there's our problem. I guarantee that's the problem. I'm going to get a new one of these supercaps. This is a supercap. It's an L and a supercap. You can see it's leaking. This is what's going on with this thing. I can pretty much guarantee you this is what's wrong with this thing. Why it is intermittent like it is. Because, as I say, it wasn't working, and I unplugged it and left it sit unplugged for a couple days before bringing it out to the workshop. And then it started working, but then it stopped. When I went to write to the disk, it stopped working. But yeah, that would explain a lot. This is a supercapacitor that is there to hold a voltage for the memory on this thing, and when the voltage gets down to a certain voltage, the microprocessor is going to start doing weird things. Plug it in and see what it says on the screen. It says flashing standby. It'll probably stay stuck there and it won't do anything, because that's the problem I was having. It was go into standby, and it would never come out of standby. It's supposed to be 5 volts. It's only coming up to 4.73. Will it load the disk, or is this thing going to act up? Now it's going to work. See if I can erase that track that I just tried to write. Yeah, I'll get a new super cap for this thing, and we'll swap that out. That one's leaking. for sure. Supercap should hold the voltage for a while after it's unplugged. That's to hold things like the clock on it, set the clock, and other information such as the table of contents and so forth. If the power were to go out while it's writing, while the recorder is going, so that when you power it back up, it remembers the table of contents and you don't wipe your disk. So when I unplug the power on this thing, it's at 5 volts now. This thing should hold the power for a long time. Like we're talking, this thing should hold the power for like weeks. That's why they put a super cap in it. But as you can see, the voltage is falling off very quickly. So I got a new super cap. This one is a 1 farad, 5.5 volts. It's a Matsushita, made in Japan, as you can see. That's going to change out this that's on here now. I need to remove the board so that I can replace it. So I'm going to take out the screws that hold the optical and analog ports on the back, and I should be able to remove the board and swap out the bad super cap. I didn't even look at what the value of this one was, but I'm sure that what I've got is probably going to be more than enough for it. Undo the connectors. Undo that one, and then these other two plug into the other board. Oh, this one plugs in over here, and then these other two plug in to this board, and this one flat connector. And now I should be able to remove the power supply board without too much difficulty. I'm pretty confident that this is going to fix the problem I'm having with this mini disc unit, because as they say, it works and then it doesn't. And when it goes intermittent, the only thing I can do to get the disc out, it won't eject. I mean, it was working fine this time, but believe me, I wouldn't have taken it out of the system and brought it out here if it was working. But it wouldn't eject. It would just sit there and say standby or flash eject on the screen, and it wouldn't do anything. And I think the problem is just this battery has gone bad. Squeeze this plastic standoff. I can lift the board out. I can work on this out of the cabinet. So let's just get the rest of the mechanism out of the way for now. This should be a pretty straightforward replacement. What is the original one? It was an Elna. Negative is onto the left. It's got a little marking on here. Yeah, it looks like I guessed correct. This is the original one. This is the Elna one, and it's 1 farad, 5.5. And the one I got, it's also a 1 farad, 5.5. The only difference is the orientation of the tabs on this one. It's the opposite direction, so we'll have to sort that out, I'll just stick a piece of wire onto one side so that it'll reach the board, and we'll replace this super cap. So I'm just going to stick a lead onto the negative terminal. The arrows indicate, incidentally, the negative direction, and it's indicated on the board here. Right, it'll show the arrows pointing this direction for negative. Okay, this unit should be ready to power up. We'll give it a quick test here before putting it together. So power up. I know the disc that I've got here, it's only got about 17 seconds of space, but I can record on it, and I will verify that it's recording. I have got other discs, but we'll play around with this one, make sure that it works. So the unit is turned on. And it's reading the table of contents. It's working. So that part works. If I want to make a recording on this, I just hit the record button, and that'll actually feed in the signal from the input from my MP3 player. So it's recording, or it's not recording, it's in standby. I would set my levels, making sure that I'm not going into over, because if you go into over, you're going set with distortion. And then to start the recording, I think I just released the pause. There we go. Now I'm recording. I've only got, say, about 17 seconds of space remaining on the disc, so it's going to stop automatically when it gets to that 17 seconds. But I'll be able to play this back, and then we'll be able to erase this track. So it should stop now. There we go. It's now full. And if I try to play it back, if I hit play, it'll play what I just recorded. Now what will happen when you notice that the TOC light, table of contents light, is lit. When I press eject, it should write the table of contents, which it's doing. You can see the writing head is moving over, and then it should eject the disc. Now I can put the disc back in and everything should work. This is where I was having trouble before with it, is it would jam at this point. It would just freeze up, and it would not read the disc, it would not eject it. I couldn't do anything. And it was doing that until I unplugged it to bring it in here. But then again, that is going to cause a problem with the voltage dropping off to a certain level. You can actually see that the casing of this thing is bulging on the negative terminal. So there we go, 16 tracks, 60 minutes and 37 seconds is being used. And if I play it back, I can dial up to the track. Remember, it was track 16. If I want to erase it, or go to track 16. Want to erase it, hit edit, erase, yes, complete. Now, when I hit eject, it's now going to write the table of contents again. Now it's writing the table of contents to eliminate that track, and the disc ejects. And what was happening before, when I had the problem happen, is I had on this disc, I think I had some tone recorded on it at the end. I had like 17 seconds of 440 tone, and I decided to delete that from this disc. And when I went to erase it and went to write the table of contents, it locked up, and I couldn't get the disc out. And the only way I could get the disc out was to unplug the thing and let it sit for like about 10 minutes until that battery completely drained, or not the battery, the supercapacitor completely drained, and then it would eject, but then it would jam again. But you can see here, this thing's leaking. This is leaking, so I'm pretty confident that this is now fixed, and I can take this back in and enjoy it, because I've got a bunch of mini discs. Here's a few of the mini discs that I've got, that I've had over the years. I've got more than this. This is just a small sampling of some of the discs. I even got one in here. I don't know where it is. It should say, there should be a message on it that says it's not a real mini disc. One of these discs in here says sample only, non-functional sample. I don't know if it's in this pile or it's in another pile, but I have one somewhere. It says non-functional sample on it. It was one that Sony actually had sitting on a display, like, so you could pick it up and hold it in your hand, but they didn't want people stealing the disc. And it was really a real disc. I don't know what happened with it. It must be still in the house. I think it was a 74. I've got more than this. This is just, I just opened up one drawer that had some mini discs in it, and this is just a little small collection of them. But yeah, there was one that said on it, had printed on it, it said non-functional sample, and it worked. There's nothing wrong with it. It recorded just fine. But these are some of the discs I've got, and see if they read. See if these other ones all read. I've even got a pre-recorded mini disc by the band 5440. That was a pre-recorded mini disc that you could not erase because it was stamped. It was like a CD type stamped disc, and a little shutter on here seems to be kind of bunged up on that one, but is there anything on this? There we go. That appears to work. Oh, that one was recorded off satellite. So I probably don't have any of the songs titled. I used to record stuff off my satellite dish, the music channels. Because, of course, back at this time, that's what we had was satellite. We didn't have IPTV or anything. There was no streaming services on the net at the time when this was recorded. This was, you had your music choice or whatever came in off satellite TV, because that's what we had back in '96. We had satellite TV. This one here is a copy of a CD. I also have a Mariah Carey CD, or a mini disc, pre-recorded one that Sony gave me. Appears to be working. I don't know if I want to try putting this disc in. That's got. We'll try it. The shutter on this thing is kind of. $54.40. Yeah, it'll put it. As you can see, the shutter on this is kind of failing, and this has been kept in its box. Next time I run into one of the guys for this band are local. In fact, one of the guys in the band, I went to school with his wife right from kindergarten, basically, right through to grade 12. So. And he lives local, at least he did. I don't know if he's still in the area, but I was at his house a few years ago doing some work for him. And I told him I had this. I said, hey, I've got one of your 5440, your original one that was released on Minidisc, Dear. And he goes, oh yeah, he says, next time you're by, just bring it by and I'll autograph it for you. Because it's a Minidisc, it's a collectible. They didn't make too many pre-recorded mini discs, so to have something on mini disc, especially of a local band that made it big, to have something on mini disc, this is actually kind of a collector's item, even more so than maybe the vinyl, because they don't make these anymore. Anyway, yeah, this thing's looks like it's working fine now, and every disc I've been putting in, it's been reading, even discs that have been sitting around just collecting dust. Let's say I don't have as many mini discs. This is about half of the collection. I got a stack a little bit bigger than this, but what have I got here? I got about, I don't know, 17 discs, I guess, here. I probably have 40 to 50. I don't have as many mini discs as I had DAT. I've got over 100 DAT tapes, but this is just to say a small sampling. But because I do have a number of mini discs, it's kind of important that my mini disc player recorder still works, and it's working. Half the time I don't even know what's on. It's kind of a treat to put one of these discs on. Something that I recorded on Pat Metheny. Something I recorded, many years ago, and I drag out these old mixes and fire them up and take a listen to them for old time's sake, and listen to some of my old mixes. Same with my my collection of DAT tapes, which I've got DAT tapes I've got probably 150 or so full DAT tapes, which are completely full. Anyway, that's this one here is working again. So if you got one of these units that is doing weird things, check out the old battery that's in it. Not battery, supercapacitor. It's a 1 farad, 5.5 volt. That's the size of the cap that's in this one. And as you can see, they do fail. And there's the difference. Power's unplugged. Remember the other one? The voltage was dropping off very quickly. That's why it was failing. Voltage was dropping down and causing the microprocessor to get into an unstable state. That 1 farad capacitor should hold that voltage for weeks. Weeks. What it's for, the reason that that exists, is when you're writing, when you're recording, the table of content information is stored in RAM. When you eject the disk, it writes it to the disk. If the power were to fail while you were making your recording, it needs to hold that information to write to the table of contents. So once power is restored, the unit spins back up, it writes the table of contents. Then your disk is usable. That's why it has a supercap. When the supercap fails, the voltage starts to drop. Once the voltage drops, the microprocessor becomes unstable, and you get all kinds of weird things like this thing not ejecting or not writing the table of contents, or just doing weird things. Now that I've replaced it, the unit is now fully functional again. So keep that in mind. If you've got one of these Minidisk units that's doing weird things, check out the supercap. The same goes for receivers. Okay, if you've got a receiver, a tuner, receiver, anything that has a battery backup, a lot of times they use these supercaps instead of actually using a physical battery, because these will self-recharge and they'll hold the charge for weeks. Whereas a lithium battery, it's good for 5 or 6 years, and then once the battery goes dead, all your stations get dumped. So a lot of times they would use a supercap for the same thing. And once they start to fail, they get into a state like this where they're not holding a charge. Once that voltage starts to drop and it gets down to only 2-3 volts below what is required to maintain the microprocessor running, you get all kinds of unpredictable results. Anyway, thanks for watching. We'll catch you in the next one real soon. Bye for now.